Welcome to the Lucas Rockwood Show. I'm a yoga teacher, a trainer, a nutritional coach, a serial entrepreneur, and I'm a father. But first and foremost, I'm a student. I love learning. This show is all about me going out and finding teachers, writers, authors, experts, PhDs, and doing my best to find their best information and share it with you to hopefully help you live a more healthy life, a more inspired life. On this week's show, we'll be talking about body positivity, sex positivity, and inevitably, in order to get to the positive, we touch on quite a bit of negative, and one of the big things that I've been trying to wrap my head around in the current political climate. I'm totally apolitical. I don't think I have a political bone in my body. It just all makes me very anxious and nervous. But at the same time, I see a lot of these things happening in public, and again, I just can't really figure out what the solution is. I mostly just see people throwing stones with the Me Too movement, with gender roles and sexuality, and again, I don't have opinions, I don't have answers, I just have a lot of questions. And so myself and Dr. Jenn, we dig into quite a bit of these kind of heavy issues. I'd love to hear your questions, comments, and feedback. You can always get in touch, podcast@yogabody.com. I also like voicemail, which is yogabody.com/Ask Lucas. Quick favor to ask: if you enjoy the show, the best way to support the show is when you're listening, take a screenshot and post it to your stories in Instagram and tag me. Or if you leave a review on iTunes, that's very helpful in terms of spreading the word as well. So hello and welcome. Today's show is called Finding the Body Positive, Sex Positive You. I am joined here with Dr. Jenn Gunsaullus. Dr. Jenn is a sociologist, a sexologist. She's a frequent speaker about sexual empowerment, about healthy relationships, about body image, erotic play, sexual health. She's a TEDx speaker, a recurring intimacy expert on San Diego Morning News. She has a black belt in a Korean martial art called So-Bak-do, if I'm saying that correctly. And you can learn about her work at Dr. Jenn's Den. Let me spell that for you. DRJENNS Den, DEN.com. Dr. Jenn's Den. We'll link up in the show notes as well. She's the author of a book called Madness to Mindfulness, Reinventing Sex for Women. We'll be talking about this book today, among other things, and all of this will be linked up in the show notes as well. Jenn, welcome back to the show. It's been a couple of years.
I know. I'm so excited to come back and have a part two. Thank you.
We've just coincidentally been doing a lot of shows about relationships and sexuality and sex in the past year. I think we probably had 6 different guests on. And one topic that we haven't chatted about is sexual assault. And especially in today's political climate, I don't even want to mention anyone's names just because things are so heated. I'll get hate mail from everybody, no matter whose name I mention, no matter what I say. But there's a lot of things coming up with very, very major political figures around the world. And one of the challenges with sexual assault that no one's talking about is the same issue with gun control, right? You have 350 million guns in the U.S. There's no way to get rid of them. With sexual assault, it's so widespread. The stats that I've heard are 1 in 5, 1 in 4, 1 in 3 women have been involved in some kind of sexual assault.
Yeah.
And how does that play out with men? I don't know, but it's got to be the same, right? 1 in 4, 1 in 5, 1 in 3. I don't know. But there's 1 degree or less of separation between an incident. And so we have this issue, which we'd all like to resolve, and yet at the same time, we're all involved in some degree, either as a victim or a perpetrator or the friend or the brother or something. It's everywhere. It's pervasive. And I don't think anyone's really talking about this openly and honestly enough. And I know that you spend time talking about this, and it's kind of a heavy place to start this conversation. But I know a ton of our listeners are like, yeah, this body positive, sex positive thing's great, but this thing happened to me back in college that I've never told anybody about, and I'm listening to my earbuds, and this all sounds horrible. So how do you help people even start to think about this when a lot of people, both men and women, are walking around with very real trauma?
Yeah. Oh, there's so many places to go with that question. It's such a great question, such a complex question. So to address what you were saying at the end there, just about, saying, hey, yeah, I want to be body positive. I've enjoyed sexual experiences, but I also have this trauma from the past, or this thing that happened that was really crappy. And I can't seem to let it go, which is super common because any kind of sexual violation or any type of coercion really shake us at a foundational level of safety and connection and self-worth and voice or lack of voice. And I don't think we don't have good words for that. We don't have I don't know that we have great social norms around really believing and supporting folks around that have experienced traumatic experiences like that, and that they carry it forward. And so I do think we somatically carry a lot of heavy emotions in us, and our traumas still can live in us. And that doesn't mean they have to define our future. But I would say through mindfulness and compassion and shining a light on what did happen and how we don't want this to define us moving forward is a starting place to just know that those things do impact us. Doesn't mean you're a weak person. It doesn't mean you're a victim. It doesn't mean that it's going to hold you down for the rest of your life. There's nothing to be embarrassed or ashamed of, even though it's shrouded in shame often, unfortunately, especially for folks that are survivors. And just first of all, to know that's normal. There's nothing wrong with that. You're in good company with many people around the world, and just face that, because that's a very vulnerable thing for people to face in the first place. You start pulling back those layers.
Yeah, and this is on the victim side. I also wonder on the perpetrator side. I mean, there's been a number of people, very public people, whether it's Hollywood producers or famous politicians, who've been outed for some things which are clearly illegal and they should be in jail for, and then some things which are just clearly creepy situations that every single person listening here has either experienced or witnessed or has been the friend of somebody that's experienced. And the question is, what do you do with that? What do you do with that perpetrator? Is that person just forever scarlet lettered? Is there no reconciliation? And this part of it's really hard, because if only the victims have a voice and there is no gray line. People are either monsters or they're saints. And growing up, I knew a lot of people. I can think back to high school parties and things. I was like, that guy, probably wouldn't leave him alone with my sister. Should he be in jail? No.
Yeah.
I don't think so. But nobody's talking about that. And then you fast forward that real 20 years, and that's when you get these Me Too movement outings and things like that. It's like, I think, the Me Too thing is really important, but on the flip side, what do we do with these perpetrators? Because they can't all just be monsters. There has to be some way for somebody to reconcile, because people make all kinds of mistakes, many of which are totally unforgivable. They should go to jail. They should get locked up. Agreed. Many of which, I don't know. People do terrible things, and there has to be some. I don't know. I really struggle with this, because some of these situations that have been really public recently, I've thought, yeah, that's totally horrible. That's totally not surprising. I saw a lot of that stuff when I was in high school. I'm not any more clear. It's not any more clear to me what to do today as it was when I was 16 years old,
Yeah. So I think one of the helpful things to do is to look at these things on a continuum of coercion. And I think, this is one thing that I think gets lost in social media and media bites. And that, so at one end of the spectrum, you do have the folks who more overtly manipulate through power and control and status to get their sexual needs met in a moment. And then at the other end of that spectrum of coercion, you have folks of, I'll say, a fair amount of, because I'm a sociologist, and so one of my specialty areas is gender role socialization. So regardless of, who we are naturally from birth, most of us are identified either as a male or a female, and then from that point on are socialized into those gender roles. And for men, that comes with a whole host of masculinity expectations and training about what it means to be a man. And there's many versions of this, but we have a more hegemonic version, like in American society, of being strong, don't show weakness, be in control, be confident, go for what you want, don't be a pussy, don't be a fag, so it's tied to sexuality stuff, and it's, it's tied to gender topics. And so, and being feminine is bad. And so there's a heaviness around that. And I think you pair that with the way that we often not only don't teach boys and young men social or emotional intelligence skills and social intelligence skills, how to attune to themselves and their emotions and articulate them responsibly, and also how to attune to others in social situations through, mindfulness and empathy and compassion. And so, but not only do we not teach it, it's often socialized out of young boys, because that means they're not man enough if they're showing emotions. And if they cry, then they're shamed for it. And so you put that together with masculinity of being like, you need to go for what you want. You tie that with hormones of teenagers too. And then you tie that with this training away from emotional intelligence. And you get a lot of young men who have no idea how to be in tune with themselves and feel empathetic for the person in front of them. And also because we don't get gender role training, that we are socialized in different ways. And to some extent, how much testosterone you have versus how much estrogen you have does change your desires and needs and what you want and who you are. You put all of that stuff together, and you can still very much end up on that continuum of coercion in sexual situations, of assuming the other person wants what you want, having no communication around it, not being attuned if they're actually present or wanting it, not being attuned to this person sort of reluctantly going along, young woman reluctantly going along in a sexual situation, even though she doesn't really want to be there. And for many women in particular, we pick up on those cues in people and in other women, and expect men to pick up on those cues too. And I know that's some of the cases that have shown up in the media have been along those lines. And men are, I think, genuinely clueless in some of those situations based on, what women expect. And so, but that's absolutely on the continuum of coercion, of pushing and asking, and the woman says no, or she says maybe later, or she walks away, and she's, verbally and non-verbally giving all sorts of cues, like, I don't really want to do this, and I'm putting this off, and then the pushing, that is coercive. So, I think there's a lot of factors that lead to that type of coercive sexual encounters being the norm in a lot of ways. And then you throw in alcohol, and then you're really off to the races. So it's a complicated situation.
Here's a challenging thing too that I've been thinking a lot about lately. So, if you were to take 100 men and 100 women, they're more similar than they are different, but you will find that, men will be more aggressive on average, more aggressive enough to the point where it's much more likely that one of these men will assault one of these women than vice versa, right? That's going to play out. And so if we look at sexual assault, if we look at violent crime, if we look at men are by and large the perpetrators, like 9 to 1, right? 9 to 1 kind of thing. And that just seems horrible. And every man is scared that they have that in them, and they know they have that in them. We're worried about that. And then on the flip side, one thing that I've been thinking about lately is aggression and physical violence and physical assault. This is horrible. There's other kinds of assault, and I don't have, this is not a complete idea, but I've just been thinking on the other side, we are men and women are working together here, and we're battling together, and we're creating problems together. So what is the role of women in this? What responsibility do they have? In what ways are they damaging men? And the reason I bring this up is because about 5 years ago, my whole social circle started having kids, and fertility rates are shockingly low right now. And I had 2 different friends who, because they were trying to conceive, it came out that they had massive, massive sexual dysfunction, and not on the woman's part, on the man's part, deep-seated psychological issues, shame and guilt and body issues, and it really made me think, like, yes, I think it's way worse that 1 in 3, 1 in 4 women in college are going to get sexually assaulted. I think that's way worse, but it's still, I never wrapped my head around the fact that something happened to this guy, this heterosexual male, from a heterosexual woman that wasn't physical, but his brain is whacked out to the point where he can't have it. He's not able to be sexually comfortable enough to have a child with the woman he loves. And I don't know. Again, I haven't really fleshed this out, but it definitely, I feel like physical violence is worse. But at the same time, this guy's problems are real. He's not able to bring life into this world, which is something he'd like to do because he has been traumatized by the emotional assault or I'm not sure what it is. And so I'm just curious if you've thought about this.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. We need to be talking about all of these things, like this, any aspects of sexual shame. It's hard to be anybody in society and to have escaped any aspect of sexual shame or body shame, or and then certainly just breaking it down to a more basic level of self-worth and worthiness of being loved emotionally in relationships and with intimacy. I tackle intimacy not just as a physical thing, but that really, what I call intimacy 360, which is looking at it at all angles of what it really means to connect deeply and vulnerably and authentically with ourselves and with another human being and create a safe space for them to do as well. And that is, physical and sexual, and it's emotional, and it's mental, and it has social components, and it potentially has spiritual components. It's a very holistic, big picture experience. And at any levels of that and aspects of that and layers of that, we've experienced things in the past that have probably, been little traumas or big traumas to us that have impacted us. And, and that's so, at the core of all of my work is mindfulness and compassion, which is teaching folks instead of, running, numbing, shaming, or running, numbing, lashing out or shutting down or numbing themselves, when anything uncomfortable memories or beliefs or emotions come up for them, that folks learn how to gently start shining a light on those things. So if they are carrying something deep-seated from something that happened in childhood or an interaction with their mom or feeling sexually coerced as a teenager or being body shamed, growing up, any of those things, they lodge themselves in us, and we want to compartmentalize them and we want to put them away, but that just means, it runs the show without us having any control over it. And it takes so much courage and so much vulnerability to move towards that compartmentalized piece, to open that box up and look at it and feel it and be in it and not feel like it's going to just like tear us apart. But it's the fear of doing that gets in the way. And frankly, the fear often is worse than the actual process of just diving into it. Because once you get over the hump, you sit with it. I always tell folks, I'm a big journaling person. Like, just sit down, give it 15 minutes, set a timer. It's all you have to do, but just give it the space and be kind to yourself. Have a little treat for yourself afterwards, because you're basically asking yourself to dismantle your alarm systems that are that are keeping you from moving towards that thing that was really negative or really scary or really emotionally or physically harmful. And so give yourself a little space for that, treat yourself afterwards. But just that door needs to be open, or, you end up, this sounds rather dire, but I do think it's true. You end up on your deathbed looking back and you're like, oh my gosh, I did not have the type of vulnerable, authentic connections I wanted to have. Why wasn't I really sharing who I am with other people? Why wasn't I more authentic? Why did I spend not more time on friendships and family? And that's the stuff that really matters. And so these things we carry in us and compartmentalize, they actually block us from what we most want deeply as humans, and that connection with other humans.
Here's another thing that I've been struggling with the topic of gender roles and responsibility and things like this. So, the idea of being body positive, sex positive, the idea that a woman should be able to wear high heels and lipstick and sexy clothing to work, that seems totally, I agree with that 100%. I don't think that anyone deserves to be harassed or catcalled, or just because someone dresses provocative, that doesn't give anyone a right to anything. At the same time, I'm a man and I react to that, and I am unable to stop my physical reaction. And again, you just get in these impossible situations. How do we even begin to reconcile these situations where we want to have an equal footing. We want to have equal grounds. And yet there's a very clear power play. A sexy, attractive woman in a workplace has power over me, yes or yes. I don't know what to do with that. I just don't know what to do with that. That doesn't mean that I can catcall her. It doesn't mean, but it's a reality that's been there since I'm 13 years old, and there's nothing that I can do about it except talk to you and try to make sense of it. And I guess where I'm getting is it starts to feel like politics. People are like, what do you believe? I was like, I believe it's really complicated. I have no idea. Like all these arguments make sense. Like the conservatives make sense. The liberals make sense. It all makes sense. I have no answer here. And I feel the same way with this gender thing. I've had a bunch of yoga students recently, all women who've been in the military. And my immediate reaction is that's awesome. And then dig into it. And it's just as awful as every stereotype you could imagine and worse. I don't want to open that thing, but 10 times worse than your worst imagination. And I just think, like, are we all monsters? I don't know. But like this, I don't have an answer. And it's certainly not, it just doesn't seem easy. That this part of us is here, and I don't know what to do with it. There's the theoretical part. There's the there's the belief system part, there's the parenting part, but then what happens when you have two 17-year-olds who are drunk at a college frat party? This is just impossible. It's just so complicated. How do you even begin to set ground rules for that? It just seems like little kids running around with scissors. That's just what it seems like, you know?
Yeah. Again, like, such great questions, so many directions to go. So let me see if I can hit a few of those in your kind of overall question. So to get back to like the workplace thing, I mean, one thing is, one is just a reframing in general that I just want to put out there, because this is something that I wish like was taught as part of, high school classes, that just kind of differences in gender role socialization. And the one thing is that of women, dressing quote unquote sexy, as you're saying, or when women dress in a way, that appears perhaps sexy to some men or to others, that there is an aspect of women, and this is part of how we're socialized in quote unquote femininity in society, is that part of women's self-worth and feeling good about themselves and feeling confident is to dress in ways like that, and just of her feeling good about who she is moving through the world and presenting herself in that way. And just that there is a distinction between her dressing in a way that feels good for her and feels confident, that does not mean that, and I know you didn't mean this, but I don't think that teenage boys, for example, know this, that does not mean that she is sexually available. It doesn't actually have anything to do with sex. Appearance of self and presentation of body actually can be quite separate. For example, last weekend we have a place called Black's Beach here in San Diego. It's a nude beach. Every year for the past 4 years for Sex Positive San Diego, a group I help run, I host an annual Black's Beach Day. And that is like such a great place to sort of screw with people's head in American society, because that beach has nothing to do with sex. That has to do with naked bodies and people just being comfortable and enjoying the sun and the sand and the ocean, and other, company of like-minded people, and just nothing to do with sex. And that we, particularly in American society, we absolutely conflate those things. And we've learned that from a younger age, because we don't have nude beaches, because we shame, bodies from a young age, and the naked body. So that one distinction I think is important. The bigger picture, one of the things you seem to be asking is like, where's the real conversation and acceptance that we are sexual beings, that we have sex drives, that we have sexual reactions.
Yeah.
Right. And that is right. And that is, and I do think men in general walk around with more of that. I mean, that's part of why you have, majority of paraphilias out there, and like you said, sexual offenses and all are by men. And the sexual, problems and exploitation created by men. And I do think it's, part of it is of the higher rates of testosterone and walking around in society like that. And that has not been worked into the conversation. While I bring that into my consent talks that I give on college campuses, I do discuss this. I don't have a good answer for it. I'm like, we need to be talking about it at least. We need to have an awareness for ourselves around it. Because I think some part of the reasons it's been not included in the conversations, if I'm to look back in feminism and, past several decades, starting in the 60s and 70s and all, anything around biology, around like sex and gender topics, has been avoided in a lot of ways, because then it feels like, this is just how men are, and this is how they naturally are as animals, and they can't control this, and those arguments are obviously problematic, but we need to have very nuanced arguments around that, and discussions and explorations and teachings, and we're just scratching the surface of that, because I think if kids grew up in elementary school, middle school, high school, and had ongoing curriculums around gender role socialization and how we're actually, socialized to be this way, and differences in that, in our, what hormones do to us and how that makes us feel emotionally and physically. What coercion and consent really look like in detail, broken down to the level of even giving somebody a hug, and what it is to have agency over your body and respect that in someone else, not by feeling rejected, but just in honoring that's someone else's body and boundaries. And then you tie that into, understanding of yourself and your own self-worth and emotional intelligence, and tie that to compassion training and mindfulness training. So these really core emotional, social intelligence skills from a young age and evolving, but tie them to us as sexual beings, as people who identify as males and females, or gender non-binary, and as heterosexual, and as gay or LGBT, or all of the complexity within that, and that we normalize all of that, and that's all part of our comfort in interacting with others, not in we need to get something from someone else, or this is a shameful topic, or I need to be drunk to be able to do this, which is how most of it plays out. So this normalization of it at this deeper felt emotional sense, and this like a common humanity sense of actually being able to really connect and be attuned to others. That just doesn't exist, especially not for kids and teenagers.
I guess what I wonder is, like, what are the rules? So, for example, when I have table manners, my parents raised me, the fork's on the left, the knife and fork on the right. You look people in the eyes, these kinds of things. I'll give a closer to home example. This morning, there was a woman breastfeeding on the street. It's very clear to me that when I speak to her, I will look in her eyes. I won't look at her breast. We're in public. That seems like basic politeness. I don't think she would care either way, but that seems like a good rule to follow. That's generally my personal rule. I'll look at their eyes, not their breasts, if they're breastfeeding. I have no idea what the rule is when somebody's attractive at work. What is obviously I'm not going to catcall them. Obviously I'm not, but what do I do with the fact that elicits a reaction? In the same way, if I had an exposed gun on my belt has a reaction, it's like that for a man. If it has a reaction, it doesn't mean I'm debilitated. It doesn't mean I can't go to work. But what do I do with that? How do I react? I know there's a big Fortune 500 company, I forget which one, but they just banned hugging from their office. And I was like, that sounds crazy. And then I thought about it. I was like, I don't know. Maybe that's good. Maybe that makes sense. At least that's a rule. Do you know what I mean? At least that's a rule. It sets some parameters. Because right now I don't know what the parameters are. And I'm very, very in control of my faculties. If anything, I'm a closed up guy. It's not like I'm flailing all over the place or anything like that. But I am very aware that experience, and I see it again and again, is literally like walking in with a holster on. It will elicit a response. There is, if a woman comes into a room in a certain way, and many types of women can come in and they can have that reaction the same way a man puts on a power suit. They call it a power suit for a reason. It elicits power. There's a reaction, and there's no rules for this. There's no table manners. Your parents didn't sit you down and say, this is what you do in this situation. This is what you do at 1 a.m. when you're at like Phi Beta Kappa and the keg stands going. There was no playbook for this. So everybody's making it up as they go along, and people have really bad table manners, you know?
Yes. So, well, first of all, I think, the example that you just gave of no hugging, I mean, workplaces are, I think, in general, just terrible examples. Like policies in workplaces, I don't think it is not cutting edge in the sexual harassment movement and actually making a difference around this, because HR departments in general are designed to make sure they're not getting sued. And that they are covering their asses, that they're not getting sued and doing things about it. Not that there's not folks doing good stuff, but in general, that's what they're doing. And I think, frankly, probably a fair number of HR trainings, and there's actually starting to be some research around this, actually have an opposite effect. They create more problems. They create more friction. I joke that, like, corporations do not bring me in to speak about sex topics because I'm like an HR manager's nightmare. Because I want to talk about all of the things that they are terrified to talk about. So workplaces, I think, that's not because of being sued and liability and stuff like that, and because of the money that corporations have behind it, that is not going to be, like, I don't even try to touch those places. That's not even, and I get what you're saying, though, but I mean, that's problematic because the majority of people spend the majority of their waking hours in that context. So I think, one of the things I was brought in like a year ago or something to talk to a group of high-end CEOs and presidents, kind of mostly in the southern United States, in a regional conference, to talk about how to take a different approach with Me Too in the workplace. I do not know how well received my talk was. I'm not sure any of them are doing it, because basically I was telling them, move towards the problem, not away from the problem. I'm like, 'cause you're a leader. You set the culture in your workplace. I know you're terrified right now. I go, but you have a chance to actually do something different, and actually something based on mindfulness and compassion and caring about because the reaction that I think many men in power are having to this is that they just want to hire less women or less people of color, or mentor women less, or not take them to lunches and mentor. And I'm like, oh my God, this is horrifying. Within 2 months of the Me Too movement coming out, and I was kind of thinking through where I thought it was going, I was like, oh my God, this is going to have a terrible backlash. I appreciate your vulnerable sharing around this, the place, you feel like you're stuck in with your kind of own reactions. I'm going to challenge you because, and I may be wrong, this is rather challenging to do to you because this is your podcast. But I feel like there's an underlying sense or interpretation on your side that it's unfair in some way. Is that correct?
No,
okay.
Not at all. I feel like it's a two-sided conversation. They're only talking about one side. I don't feel like anything about the Me Too.
Yeah.
I don't feel like anything about the Me Too is unfair. If anything, I think it needs to go times 10. I mean, like this Me Too stuff, I'm like, yeah, and like, why don't we just keep going down the list? This hasn't even begun. It's not the part that the problem is they're not talking about the perpetrators in any way that it's exactly what you talked about in the business setting. If you bury it, the same kind of thing, it gets exploded, right? That the pressure builds and people are pent up and they don't know how to react and this kind of thing. I just feel like the other side is not being addressed. Nobody's talking about the fact that the reason that politicians are covering up for this guy is because they were probably at the same party and probably the same thing happened, and they're just as guilty as he is, and they're just as confused. And if we don't have that conversation, how can we only have the victim conversation? This is the part that I'm just not wrapping my head around, is like we're only talking about one side of the issue. I just don't know how can you solve the problem without talking about the actual instigators?
Yeah.
It just seems...
agreed. Well, and I think some of the reasons is that I mean, some of this is right. The pendulum has swung the opposite way. In fact, like when Me Too came out, and the fact is, I can remember. This makes me like choke up even thinking about it. Like the week that came out, that like every woman I knew on Facebook and social media had some sort of personal experience, whether it's around sexual assault and coercion or sexual harassment in the workplace. Like everyone,
every
woman
not
probably
me too,
over
everybody
age
too. Yeah.
18. It's like horrible that how prevalent this was for women, and how much while we all knew about it, we didn't know everybody, all of us women had the experiences, and that it finally had a tipping point that we were being heard and listened to, and that this was being like, hey, this really is serious. Hey, this really is a problem. We really do need to do something. Now, that does mean the pendulum swings the opposite side, and there's not always responsibility about how that's being voiced. And I do think, and then we then have, to some extent, a fair amount of the men, their responses to it have been defensive or have been blaming or shaming. And, social media will jump on that bandwagon and be like, well, look at how she dresses, or, she's making this up, or she's just trying to get attention. And so there's, that's part of it, because it's just on being done with the depth of nuance and responsibility and compassion on all sides. I mean, and that's not really known what social media is known for in general. But so I agree with you. I do think, some of it is, men in general are not taught to be vulnerable. So to get to the heart of what is happening for men in these situations, I think sometimes men don't know. And then they're like, wait, that was wrong. And then maybe they feel bad because they're told it was wrong. And then they get reactive, or they shut down, but then they don't even know what they did was wrong. And so, but I agree with you. That type of stuff is fascinating to me. I've thought that I've wanted to work on something that really looks at both sides of, coercive situations, just to get a deeper understanding. And so that we can have, because right, if we don't understand why, people are doing bad, hurtful things in the first place and don't even realize they're bad and hurtful, or don't care enough, we can't change these patterns at all. So no, I agree with you. There's absolutely complexity, and the men's stories, and the men's shame, and the men's vulnerability, and the men's self-worth, and their sense of masculinity. And not, here's the thing, most of the men, and that's why I use that coercion continuum. Most of the men that maybe find themselves on it, or women who, point to men and been like, you're on that, they're good guys. They don't want to be bad guys. They don't want to hurt women. And that matters. And that's my approach to these consent topics. You're not a bad person. We are all the product of our society and how we've been raised. And it's done an injustice to all of us. And it is coming to a head now around these topics, and everyone's getting hurt by it. So, yeah.
I'm remembering now why my mind started. It was a couple of months ago. My mind just started. I just hadn't even thought about this until I think it was an episode of The Daily, the podcast The Daily. And they were trying to wrap their head around one of these political issues. And they interviewed a totally random woman. I believe she was living out on Long Island or something. And she shared a would-be sexual assault story from her teenage years. It wasn't a sexual assault, but like typical scary, awkward situation that probably half of the women listening have, where she was with a guy in a car. She told him no. He pushed. She told him it took her 3 times to get him off, and she was crying. She was traumatized. It was her boyfriend. And she tells this story, and then she says, 2 summers later, they made amends. And he came to her, and he hadn't been able to date, and he felt terrible. He didn't know what he was doing. And I just thought, like, whoa, this is a good story. This is a good story because,
wow.
You know what I mean? What I'm saying is things have to be forgivable. He did not deserve to be in jail.
Agreed.
He did not deserve to lose his manhood. He just needed to fix it. This is what I'm saying. Like the rule, like what are the rules? Like this guy, he went too far. He did something physically he shouldn't have done, in the same way that people say things they shouldn't say. But there has to be some level where reconciliation is okay. And the whole point of this story was maybe what a lot of this Me Too is, maybe at least 25% of it is like a guy from your past just needs to call up and say, hey, I was a total asshole. I just totally messed up. You know, do we need to talk about this? Is there anything I can do to fix this? Let me take responsibility for that. I don't know. And it really made me think. And you know, I'm a guy. I don't have any skeletons in my closet, but spent most of my life all boxed up. I've been in long-term monogamous relationships, mostly just scared to even get close. I'm like the Keanu Reeves, afraid to put my arm around a woman in a photo kind of thing. So I don't have these. I don't have, like, I know for a lot of men, the Me Too thing, just they go, oh no, what if that story comes out? It wasn't like that for me, but it really made me think, like, that so many things must be forgivable, or we're all monsters and demons, and we can't walk around feeling like monsters and demons, because that guilt and shame is just as bad as the incident itself, you know?
Yeah, no, and I think that's a really beautiful point. I think where that's getting lost, if I looked at this, you know, from a sociological lens, I think there's unfortunately not a lot of space for that right now in the conversation, and hopefully there will be moving forward, because I think there's a lot of reactivity from women that have been hurt, to be like, really? You feel bad about what you did, and I'm supposed to, you know, have compassion for you? And I don't, and while I get that response, in the bigger picture and like down the road, to actually be able to make the paradigm shifts in social sexual norms that we need to be able to make to actually to halt this problem and turn it around, we need to have compassion. We need to, for ourselves and for others. And like you said, and there needs to be space for forgiveness, for genuine, like, oh my God, I fucked up. I don't know why I did that. I didn't know better. Not an excuse. You know, how are you dealing with this? Do you want to talk about this? Can I help in any way? What do you need to hear from me? Like, it wasn't right, and you didn't deserve that. And I hope you don't feel shamed by this, because you shouldn't, and you did not deserve to be treated that way. Like, that's an apology. That is a deep felt, vulnerable ownership of messing up. That's not easy for most folks to do. Also, you know, we're talking in this case, women, they might not be able to receive that.
Of course.
And that's
their right. Yeah. Of course.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, right, that place for people to move forward and make apologies like that, and then have no attachment to the outcome of it, just know it's the right thing to do. I mean, but that's like I said, who's trained in that level of vulnerability? You know, especially men. We talk, you know, where have they gotten that type of emotional intelligence training, and where have they been encouraged? You know, because vulnerability is considered weak, instead of, you know, emotional vulnerability actually requiring so much courage and self-knowledge and strength to be able to make an apology like that. We have a whole bastardized view on vulnerability, especially as it's tied to masculinity. So, but yeah, no, I think that would be, I've been waiting and wanting more politicians to do stuff like that.
Yeah, just take full responsibility. I'm so curious how that would play out. It's very unclear to me. I don't have a clear idea, but it'd be very curious to me to see someone just take full responsibility. Totally happened. Happened. I was in the wrong part of my life. I did it. It happened. I'll do anything I can to fix it. I hope you accept me. It would just be very interesting to see how that plays out. I don't know. I just don't know if people prefer lies to forgiveness. You know? Yeah.
There's an example of that, and I cannot remember his name or the show he was on, but this was about a year and a half ago, I think, so still early in Me Too. He was a writer for a television show, and pretty respected, and he managed other young writers, and there was a woman that he managed, and she was very young, and he like hit on her and wanted to date her, and then she was like, no, and then she got, you know, perhaps better writing opportunities because he liked her, and then everybody blamed her for it, and then she's like, well, I don't even know, like, how skilled am I? Am I getting this because I'm skilled? Am I getting this because you like me, even though I keep telling you, leave me alone? And then eventually, like, he got it and then turned on her and then was really crappy towards her and very hostile in the work environment. Like, all of these things of what the complexity of sexual harassment, and she did nothing to feed it. She did nothing with him, and it was all him. And then she came out on social media around it. I don't think she named names. He owned it. His apology was a little crappy initially, I think. He circled back like a month later and like actually recorded a short podcast about it. It was well done. And when it was well done in that way, she publicly forgave him. And I think it gave him space to move forward then. So I think part of what we're missing is that we are not getting good apologies. And so I do think there needs to be space for forgiveness. There needs to be legit, heartfelt, own it through and through. And also owning, because what this guy did was like, I had no idea. Like, I could see now what you're saying. Like, here I am thinking I'm like giving you opportunities or being kind to you. He goes, I'm actually undermining you professionally and intellectually, because you're not being just treated as an intellectual equal, that you get to know that you're learning and growing and that you're getting advancement because you're actually good at what you're doing. And that really undermined her sense of self and her knowledge of how good she was as a writer. And that he like got that type of complexity, that type of thing. I know, as women that I talk to, that there's so many ways that these experiences undermine us in the workplace, and in sexual situations and dating situations that are so nuanced that never get acknowledged. And I think his ability to do that and wrap his brain around it and do it publicly, that's huge. And that's huge for other men to be like, oh, crap, I didn't get that. Like, I get that now, what you're saying. I had no idea that was a part of this. And I can see how that's really professionally harmful. So I do think we have an example out there. We have one where it was done well. Yeah, but not many examples of that, unfortunately.
So complicated and such a great topic.
Oh my gosh,
I wasn't expecting things to go this way, but I think this is a really valuable conversation and one that we could probably go on for a long time. But I know that your book's being re-released. You got some new things going on. So tell people where to find you online, where to find your book, and what you're up to.
Yeah, so this is my first book. I'm finally getting my first book published, called From Madness to Mindfulness, Reinventing Sex for Women. The publication date for that is August 13th, 2019. So it's available for pre-order now on Amazon. My main hub for everything online is my Dr. Jenn's Den website that you mentioned at the beginning. And so I have my TEDx talks on there. I have a pretty powerful, we talked all about Me Too and consent. And so I have a pretty powerful personal consent violation video that I share that you can find at the bottom of my homepage on the left, called Sex and the Price of Masculinity, where I share a violation I experienced and then looking at it through the lens of sociology and compassion and a lot of what we talked about here and how we could start creating a new narrative around these interpersonal interactions and sexual relationships. So yeah, folks can, and then, I have a whole In the Den with Dr. Jenn YouTube series. Folks can find me there. I have my own podcast, Sex Talk with Clint and the Doc. So they can find that all through my website.
There are lots of memes online right now that glorify entrepreneurship and glorify risk-taking and fail quick and fail fast and fail forward. I don't know where these memes come from, but they don't come from entrepreneurs. Every entrepreneur I know is traumatized by their past failure, and they do everything they can to avoid it. And if you're a yoga teacher and you're a Pilates teacher, a holistic health coach, whatever you're doing in the health and wellness field, I would really encourage you to do your best to set yourself up for success. The failures, the bumps and bruises, the scrapes, they'll inevitably come. But as much as you can stack win on win on win, you can really get positive momentum. So when I talk to new teachers coming through our training programs or new teachers I'm consulting with, I always recommend they start with something simple, profitable, and low or no cost to get started. And that's private yoga teaching or private coaching if you're a health coach, or private Pilates teaching if you're a fitness coach. And it's such a great way, and suddenly it's working all over the world. In big cities, small towns, even remote island destinations, we have graduates doing really great things. To read their stories and how they're using this material, this approach to set up their own businesses, check out myyogabusiness.com. You can read a lot of their stories there. And you can also find out if it's right for you. Again, it's appropriate for a yoga teacher, a Pilates teacher, a personal trainer, or any kind of health and wellness coach. This program is really geared to take exactly what you're doing now, but tweak it and customize it to working one-on-one with clients so you're solving their problems, and you'll work with them privately in your home or their home or office. It's very simple. It's low tech. It's not online marketing. It's not about becoming an influencer, and it's not about having, an office full of staff or anything like that. This is something that you can hit the ground running. By the end of the program, at the end of 21 days, you'll have your first client, and again, you'll be stacking win on win, and from there you can grow into lots of different opportunities. I mention it because we have an intake right now for our next course. Check out myyogabusiness.com, and I hope you can join us. This week's nutritional tip is in response to a listener question. Listener Jenny says, Lucas, when is the best time to take vitamins? Empty stomach, full stomach, spread out through the day? I get so confused. This is a great question. Not enough people pay attention to this, but a lot of vitamins make you feel terrible. This is why I'm not a huge fan of multivitamins, even really high quality ones, because you're mixing up all these different things together at the same time. So vitamin C and calcium and magnesium at the exact same time, for me, doesn't make my belly feel good at all. Sometimes vitamins will make me feel really drowsy. So, for example, vitamin A makes me feel really drowsy. I don't know why. Vitamin D keeps me up at night. I don't know why. So the one thing that I would say is less is more. And so don't try to take 300 pills like you'll see these biohackers doing online. That's just a recipe for disaster pants sitting on the toilet. And don't take things that you don't know why you're taking them. If you take too many things, it's just going to be expensive urine, your belly's going to feel bad, and you're not going to know what's going on. As a general rule, you want to think about fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, K with food, with fat, and water-soluble vitamins, perhaps with a light meal or a snack. So if you're taking vitamin C, for example, which is water-soluble, B vitamins are water-soluble, you might take those with nothing if they feel okay on your stomach, or with just a light snack, something like that. But in general, pay attention to how your vitamins make you feel, and I would encourage you to space them out throughout the day and pay extra attention to which ones make you sleepy and which ones keep you up. A lot of people don't realize, and they just start popping these multivitamins. They run out of their multivitamins 3 months later, and suddenly they're feeling a lot better simply because something in that multivitamin was making them feel bad. Digestive discomfort can really translate into a whole bunch of other things. If your gut is not feeling good, your emotions can get out of whack, your emotional health throughout the day can be really small things. You can just be irritable, and your cognition can be wonky. I mean, you just can't think clearly. You're not getting enough done at work. These little things can really make a big difference. Vitamins are very powerful. Everyone should be experimenting with vitamins. Everybody should be using vitamins. Almost all of you, for example, are deficient in vitamin D, you're deficient in omega-3s, very likely low in magnesium. All these things happen, so you should be using vitamins. That doesn't mean you just go buy everything in Walgreens and start popping pills like a maniac. That's not the solution. So to answer your question specifically, vitamins A, D, K, those are fat soluble. Eat those with some fat, whether it's some heavy cream or coconut or a meal or whatever you're doing. Water-soluble vitamins, the obvious ones would be things like vitamin B and vitamin C. You could take those with simply a snack or even with water if your belly feels good. But more than anything, I would pay attention to how each specific vitamin makes you feel, and different brands will make you feel different ways. The biggest ones you need to watch out for are fermented vitamins. So B vitamins, they're fermented, they're created from a fermentation process, and also vitamin K, which is very common. Those are the ones that really seem to affect people the most because they come from a fermentation process. Sometimes those fermentation byproducts can give you gas and bloating, indigestion, and kind of brain fog. So sometimes you have to switch brands and experiment with B complex vitamins specifically, and with vitamin K. The K vitamins it's from a fermentation process as well. Hope that's helpful. We have a listener question here from Susie. Susie says, I would appreciate your advice. I'm at the end of my tether with my feet. I'm 41, have been practicing yoga for 10 years, teaching yoga for nearly 3. During my teacher training, my feet became sore, mainly under the heels, but also the ball of the feet. Doctor diagnosed plantar fasciitis and a physio and acupuncture, and I had physiotherapy and acupuncture for this. I did all the exercises, including rolling a tennis ball under my feet, icing, etc., with no benefits from any of these treatments. And after 2.5 years of suffering from this, a couple of weeks ago I decided to go to a private doctor who arranged an MRI scan. The scan shows I have heel pad atrophy and probably some fat pad wearing in the balls of my feet. Interesting. I'm seeing a specialist this week and will probably be given insoles. Is there anything you'd recommend? My main concern is teaching yoga. It's really painful to teach in barefoot and is probably making the condition worse. I have started to teach and practice yoga in dance trainers. I'm not sure if this is the right way forward. I wonder if there's any footwear you'd recommend to wear for yoga. I'd be grateful if you have any advice. Susie, feet are super challenging. I have feet problems as well. I have my whole life. I have these monster arches. When I first started practicing yoga, my arches were so pronounced I could take a number 2 pencil, a pen, and slide it effortlessly underneath both my feet without it touching the skin. Now, on a good day, the very edge of the outsides of my feet will touch the ground, but even then, just barely. And if I let my feet go, they will tighten up, literally like bridges. And that sounds good, and it certainly protects my knees, but it's overarching. My toes are affected. They're all tight. It really affects my balance. I can't get a proper grip on the floor. So I've really struggled with this. We created our Awesome Toes product, in fact, out of my own personal experimentation. If you'd like to check that out, it's kind of an interesting product, Awesome Toes. In terms of your condition, so plantar fasciitis is a fascia disorder. Fascia, let's imagine that you are looking at a T-bone steak and you are looking at the red meat muscle, and there are these white sinewy tissues that are kind of webbing between that red muscle. That is fascia. Fascia is the web work that holds the soft serve mush of muscle together in your body. Fascia and muscle are often referred to as myofascial release, muscular fascial release, myofascial tension, muscular fascial tension. Muscle and fascia cannot be worked on separately, cannot be separated. They are one and the same. If you are pressing on your muscles, you're pressing on your fascia. If you're stretching your muscles, you're stretching your fascia. They do behave differently. They're different types of tissue. Imagine that same T-bone steak. That muscle tissue is different than that white fascia tissue. You know that from touching it. Sorry for the gross meat analogy, but it's the easiest way for you to understand. And so that's what we're talking about. When we talk about plantar fasciitis, we're talking about the fascia in the bottom of your foot having some sort of inflammation, sliding surface disorder. It's a very generalized term to refer to a whole bunch of different things that are going on with that fascia, that white tissue in the bottom of your feet. It can be very frustrating. It can be very long-term. It can be chronic. It very often is. What is the solution? Everyone's got a different theory. Susie's doctor is throwing insoles at her. Other physios will throw, you sit in front of the TV and you pick up a ball of socks with your toes again and again and again. Other people will put you in heavily supported shoes. Other people will put you in minimal shoes. I really hesitate to give an answer because there are so many different ways to find solutions to this. Plantar fasciitis is a huge problem. Almost everybody who runs suffers from this at some point. And again, you'll find very differing opinions on what to do about it. And the reality is each of our bodies are different. I can tell you from my experience, I've had plantar fasciitis and tendinitis very, very strongly in my feet, particularly my right foot since I was a teenager. And the best solution for me, the most success that I've found, is by doing less and less shoes. I wore just flip-flops for years, which was okay, but you do funny things gripping with your toes. And my new approach is either barefoot or minimal footwear. Lems are kind of our favorite footwear here at Yoga Body. Lems Primal 2, I believe is the name of the model. Yeah, Lems Primal 2 is the one that, I've been wearing a bunch of Yoga Body people wear. It takes you can wear Awesome Toes inside them, by the way, but it takes a little while to get used to those, and it certainly gets worse before it gets better. First 3 to 4 months of that, and me switching to a standing desk and all those kinds of things, really pretty miserable. My feet felt horrible. My feet are better now than ever before, but still not great, and it's definitely a lifelong journey. The things you're doing all make sense. Whenever you're looking at a condition like this, I would always come back to the trifecta of strength, flexibility, and balance. So make sure you have a good range of motion in your foot and your toes and your ankle, that whole area. Make sure you have plenty of really healthy, full range of motion, mobility. In terms of strength, make sure that you have strong feet. You can do that by, doing various exercises like the physio had you doing, but there are also stronger exercises that you can do, such as, squats and duck walks and these sorts of things. And then thinking about balance, right, left side, and balancing of muscle groups and things like that. So some very general thoughts. I wouldn't call it advice, but just some thoughts in terms of how to approach this problem, and definitely feel your pain and feel your frustration. Hope you find a solution. Thanks, Susie.
This week's iTunes review is by Hillbilly from the US. Hillbilly says, Lucas Rockwood is a smart yogi with a curious mind. Not only does his podcast delve into fitness, health, and nutrition, but he also gets in everyday life. Dental health, mold in your home, relationships. He asks a lot of questions and finds great people to answer them. I love that each episode has a listener Q&A section and he gets personal. I really respect Lucas. He's honest and forthcoming and puts a lot of great information out there for everyone. Thank you for being curious and sharing. I look forward to your podcast every week. Eliza Atwater. Thanks, Hillbilly. You have won the Yoga Trapeze. Email us at podcast@yogabuddy.com and we'll ship it out to you.
If you're a regular Yoga Talk Show listener, you'll definitely want to get on my email list. Go to yogabuddy.com/sign me up. When you enter your email address there, we always have free giveaways every month, yoga straps, water bottles, discounts in our shop, and all kinds of other things. When you sign up at yogabuddy.com/sign me up, I'll send you just one email a week with updates about the show, special offers, new courses, and valuable information that I think you'll find useful. So go to yogabuddy.com/sign me up to claim your free prize now.